She was born to rule galaxies, but he carried her like she was fragile. Fallen star. The meteoric trail of Niara Zeph's damaged vessel burned across the sky of Thresh like an ominous omen. Inside the failing craft, she gripped the controls with trembling hands, the purple hue of her skin paling as life support systems failed one by one. "Maintain trajectory," she commanded the ship's AI, her voice steady despite the fear coursing through her veins. As celestial architect of Meridian Prime, she had designed star systems and plotted the course of entire civilizations, but now she couldn't even control her own descent. The sabotage had been precise, clearly the work of the hegemony, faction that opposed her revolutionary plans for resource distribution across the 9 systems. They had almost succeeded in eliminating her during the diplomatic mission. Now, as her ship plummeted toward the mining outpost planet below, Niara wondered if they might get their wish after all. Impact came with a deafening roar. Metal twisted and sparked around her as the vessel carved a deep trench into the rust-colored soil of Thresh's outer territories. When the movement finally ceased, Niara pulled herself from the wreckage, blood trickling from a gash on her forehead and pain lancing through her leg. The atmosphere was breathable but thin, making each step a struggle as she limped away from the smoking ruins. Night was falling, bringing with it the notorious dust storms of Thresh. Niara had studied this planet. Of course, she had studied them all. But experiencing the bitter cold and stinging particles firsthand was entirely different from analyzing data in her crystal chambers on Meridian Prime. She needed shelter, and quickly. As darkness enveloped the landscape, Niara's strength began to fail. The injuries from both the assassination attempt and the crash were taking their toll. The distant lights of a settlement shimmered on the horizon, impossibly far in her condition. She stumbled, fell, and found herself unable to rise again. The dust storm was upon her now, obscuring visibility to mere inches. Through the howling wind, Niara thought she heard the sound of an engine. Then a silhouette emerged from the swirling particles, a figure in a respirator mask and protective gear. "Hey, can you hear me?" The voice was deep, concerned, barely audible over the storm. Niara tried to respond, but her voice failed her. Consciousness was slipping away fast. Strong arms lifted her from the ground with surprising gentleness. Despite her slender frame, Niara possessed a density uncommon to humans, a trait of her species. Yet the stranger carried her as if she weighed nothing at all, cradling her against a broad chest. "I've got you," he said. "Just hold on." Through fading awareness, Niara registered being placed inside a rugged terrain vehicle. The stranger worked quickly, applying emergency medical gel to her visible wounds before wrapping her in thermal blankets. "My name's Eldon," he told her, starting the engine. "Eldon Vale. I'm taking you to my place. The settlement's too far and you need immediate attention." Niara wanted to warn him about who she was, about the danger he was inviting by helping her, but darkness claimed her before she could form the words. When she next opened her eyes, she was lying on a narrow bed in a modest dwelling carved into the rocky hillside. Medical equipment beeped softly nearby, monitoring her vital signs. Eldon sat at a workbench across the room, his back to her as he examined what appeared to be fragments of her ship's communication array. Niara studied him silently. He was tall and solidly built, with dark hair pulled back in a short tail. His hands, currently working with delicate precision on the technology before him, bore the calluses of physical labor but moved with the confidence of someone with medical training. "You're not from around here," he said without turning, somehow sensing that she was awake. "That ship of yours, nothing like that's ever landed on Thresh before. At least not intentionally." Niara tensed, calculating her options. Her identity had to remain secret. If word reached the hegemony that she had survived, they would descend on Thresh with destructive force. "My name is Niara," she offered cautiously. Thank you for your assistance." Eldon turned then, and Niara found herself looking into eyes the color of Thresh's amber skies. They were kind eyes, but sharp with intelligence. "Well, Niara," he said with a slight smile, "you've got 3 broken ribs, a fractured tibia, and enough contusions to win a fighting championship. Whatever brought you to our little dust ball, it must have been something important." He had no idea how right he was. Hidden light dawn broke over Thresh's rugged landscape, casting long shadows through the small windows of Eldon's dwelling. Niara woke to the sound of quiet movement, Eldon preparing a simple breakfast in the adjoining kitchen area. For a moment, she allowed herself the luxury of observation without the weight of her responsibilities. The dwelling was modest, but thoughtfully arranged. A combination of practical necessity and personal touches. Medical equipment shared space with mechanical tools, while handcrafted items suggested patient hours of creative work during Thresh's long dust seasons. It was nothing like the crystalline spires and quantum architecture of Meridian Prime. Yet there was something deeply appealing about its honest simplicity. "Good morning," Eldon said, noticing her awareness. "Hungry?" Niara nodded, attempting to sit up before wincing at the pain. "Easy," he cautioned, moving quickly to adjust her position with gentle efficiency. "Your body needs time." "Time is a luxury I may not have," she replied, accepting the bowl of grain porridge he offered. It was seasoned with local spices, simple but satisfying. "Your injuries tell an interesting story," Eldon remarked, sitting across from her. "Some happened before the crash. Someone tried to hurt you deliberately." Niara measured her response carefully. "I've made political enemies." "Haven't we all?" he said with unexpected bitterness. "Mine were enough to end my military career and exile me to this backwater." His candor surprised her. On Meridian Prime, such openness would be considered a dangerous vulnerability. "You were a soldier?" she asked. "Combat medic. 12 years with the Planetary Alliance forces." He gestured to a small insignia mounted on the wall, one Niara recognized as belonging to an elite medical unit. "Until I refused to follow certain orders." The conversation paused as Eldon's communication device buzzed. He checked the screen and frowned. "The settlement's sending search parties to your crash site. Official story is meteor impact, but someone's asking questions." He looked at her directly. "Whoever's after you has reach." Fear tightened around Niara's heart. "I should leave. My presence endangers you." Eldon's laugh was soft but genuine. "You can barely walk. Besides, I've been endangered before." He stood, gathering their empty bowls. "Rest. I'll go into the settlement to gather information and supplies. We'll figure out our next steps when I return." After he left, Niara found herself drawn to Eldon's workbench. Among the tools and spare parts lay a small holographic projector. Curiosity overcoming caution, she activated it. The image that appeared showed a younger Eldon in military dress, standing beside a diverse group of medics. They were smiling, arms around each other's shoulders. A camaraderie that seemed foreign to Niara, whose entire life had been structured around protocol and power dynamics. She switched it off when she heard Eldon's vehicle returning sooner than expected. His expression as he entered was grave. "They're scanning for non-human biosignatures," he said without preamble, "which means they know exactly who they're looking for." He studied her with new awareness. "Just how important are you, Niara?" She met his gaze steadily. "Important enough that if they find me, everyone in this region will be considered collateral damage." Instead of fear, Eldon's face showed only determination. "Then we'd better make sure they don't find you." He moved to a concealed panel in the floor, revealing a hidden storage area. "This planet has a history of rebellion. Most homesteads have places to hide things or people." As he helped Niara into the hidden space, their faces came close. For a moment, time seemed suspended between them. "Why are you helping me?" she whispered. "You don't even know who I am." His eyes held hers. "I know enough." The moment was broken by the distant sound of approaching vehicles. Eldon quickly concealed her, but not before impulsively pressing something into her hand, a small communication device. "If anything happens to me," he murmured, "use this. There are still people who owe me favors." Darkness enveloped Niara as the panel closed above her. From her hiding place, she heard the muffled sounds of Eldon greeting the search party with casual ease, playing the role of the reclusive ex-military mechanic perfectly. Her fingers tightened around the device he'd given her, a token of trust that felt more valuable than all the power she wielded as celestial architect. Hours passed before Eldon retrieved her, the search party satisfied with their inspection and moving on to other areas. "They'll be back," he said, helping her to the bed. "But we have time." That night, as Thresh's 3 moons cast shifting patterns across the dwelling, Niara finally shared the truth of her identity. "I am Niara Zeph, celestial architect of Meridian Prime," she said softly. "I oversee the development and resource management of 9 star systems." Eldon's expression remained unchanged. "And someone wants that position badly enough to kill for it. The hegemony faction believes resources should be concentrated among the elite worlds," she explained. My plans for equitable distribution threaten their wealth and influence. So you're fighting for the little guys, Eldon said with a small smile. No wonder they want you gone. His simple understanding of her complex political situation touched something in Niara. On Meridian Prime, she was surrounded by advisors and analysts, yet none had ever distilled her work to its essence so clearly. As days turned into weeks, Niara's body healed under Eldon's care. He taught her about Thresh's ecosystem, showed her how to repair the mechanical systems that made life possible in this harsh environment. In turn, she shared stories of distant worlds and cosmic phenomena he'd only heard about in propaganda broadcasts. One evening, as they sat watching the sunset from a concealed outlook near his dwelling, Eldon's hand found hers. The touch was tentative, questioning. In another life, he said quietly, we would never have met. Niara looked at their intertwined fingers, his tanned and scarred from years of work, hers with their subtle purple hue. Perhaps that would have been the greater tragedy. When his lips found hers in the fading light, Niara felt something she'd never experienced in all her years of cosmic authority, a sense of belonging not to the stars, but to a single moment, a single touch. The kiss deepened, awakening sensations that transcended the physical. For the first time, Niara understood why ancient texts spoke of love as a force comparable to gravity, invisible yet powerful enough to bind worlds together. Whispers between worlds. The mining settlement of Karst Basin had seen better days. Once a thriving operation supplying rare minerals to half the sector, it now subsisted on maintenance contracts and the occasional passing trader. It was the perfect place to disappear, or it had been, until Niara's arrival had brought unwanted attention. Eldon moved through the settlement's market with practiced casualness, trading some of his mechanical repairs for supplies. The search patrols had become less frequent over the past month, but new faces had appeared, observers too polished for the rough-edged community, asking too many questions about recent atmospheric disturbances. Vale, a voice called from a shadowed doorway. Got a minute? Lorik Den had been Thresh's communications officer for decades, one of the few who knew about Eldon's past with the Alliance. The older man's expression was troubled as Eldon approached. Official channels are buzzing, Lorik muttered. Meridian Prime announced the death of their celestial architect 3 weeks ago. Grand funeral, succession ceremony, the works. He studied Eldon's face. Funny thing is, I've been intercepting coded transmissions suggesting she's still alive. Eldon kept his expression neutral. Politics of the core worlds don't concern us out here. They do when military vessels start changing course toward our sector, Lorik countered. Whatever you're involved in, Vale, be careful. The dust storms start next week. Good time for anyone needing to move unnoticed. Back at the dwelling, Eldon found Niara standing before a makeshift communications array she'd assembled from parts of her crashed ship. Her slender fingers manipulated the holographic interface with practiced precision. They've replaced me, she said without turning. Archon Veritax now holds my position. Veritax, he was behind the assassination attempt? Niara nodded. And now he controls the resource distribution for 9 systems. Already he's redirecting supply chains to favor the elite worlds. She turned to him, her features tight with concern. Millions will suffer food shortages within months. Eldon moved to her side, placing a hand on her shoulder. You can't fight an entire political system alone. I'm not alone anymore, she said, covering his hand with hers. And I still have allies who would support me, if they knew I was alive. That night, as Thresh's bitter winds howled outside, they held each other close beneath the thermal blankets. What had begun as comfort had evolved into something deeper, more essential. Niara traced the scars on Eldon's chest, remnants of the war he rarely spoke about. What were the orders you refused? She asked softly. The ones that ended your career? Eldon was quiet for so long she thought he might not answer. We were sent to pacify a mining colony like this one. They were striking over unsafe conditions. His voice grew distant. Command ordered us to release a pathogen into their water supply. Nothing lethal, just debilitating enough to end the resistance. I couldn't do it. Niara pressed closer to him, her head resting over his heart. You risked everything for strangers. I risked my career, he corrected. You're risking your life for billions you'll never meet. Their kiss was different this time. Deeper, hungrier, laden with the knowledge that their time together existed in a fragile bubble that could burst at any moment. As clothes were discarded and bodies entwined, Yara felt the barriers between them dissolving. Physical, cultural, spiritual. Eldon's touch was reverent yet passionate, discovering the subtle differences in her physiology with fascination rather than hesitation. For Nyara, whose life had been defined by calculation and control, surrendering to sensation was a revelation. She had never imagined that such vulnerability could feel like strength, that intimacy could create its own kind of cosmic connection. Later, as they lay together in the afterglow, a decision crystallized in Nyara's mind. "I need to send a message to my allies," she said, tracing patterns on Eldon's chest. "Before Veritax consolidates too much power." Eldon nodded slowly. "Lorik mentioned the dust storms start next week. They interfere with most scanning technology. Good cover for transmissions and movement. If I signal my location, it puts everyone here, at risk," she continued. "But if I do nothing, billions suffer." Eldon lifted himself onto one elbow, looking down at her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "When I found you in that storm, I didn't know I was saving a world shaper. But now that I know," he traced the curve of her face, "some things are worth any risk." The next morning brought news that shattered their careful plans. An urgent message from Lorik warned that Alliance vessels had entered orbit, with dropships already descending toward Karst Basin. "They're not just searching anymore," Eldon said grimly, gathering essential supplies. "They know you're here." Nyara's face hardened with resolve. "Then it's time to stop hiding." As they prepared to leave the dwelling that had become their sanctuary, Eldon pulled Nyara into a fierce embrace. "Whatever happens next," he murmured against her hair, "know that you've changed me. Before you I was just surviving. Now I remember what it means to fight for something." Nyara looked up at him, memorizing every detail of his face. "On Meridian Prime, we believe the universe has patterns that connect all things, cosmic threads binding distant stars together. Finding you wasn't accident or coincidence. Eldon Vale. It was alignment." Their kiss was brief but held the promise of 1,000 more, if fate allowed them the chance. Outside, the first winds of the season's greatest dust storm were beginning to rise, obscuring the horizon in swirls of copper and gold. Somewhere above, through the thickening atmosphere, Alliance ships were searching for a woman who had died in official records, but lived on in the heart of a former soldier. Together, they stepped into the storm. The price of stars. The dust storm transformed Thresh's landscape into an impenetrable copper haze, granting Nyara and Eldon a temporary veil of protection as they navigated toward Karst Basin's outskirts. Their destination was an abandoned mining outpost that Eldon had converted into an emergency shelter years ago, a precaution from his more paranoid days that now seemed prescient. "The outpost has a long-range transmitter," Eldon explained as he piloted their vehicle through the blinding storm. "Military grade, salvaged from a downed Alliance cruiser. If anything can punch through the interference to reach your allies." "That's it?" Nyara studied the navigation display, her mind calculating probabilities and contingencies, a habit from her years of cosmic architecture. "Even with the storm's cover, they'll have technology to track our movements. That's why we're not going directly there." Eldon's smile held a hint of mischief that made him seem younger. Sometimes the old methods work best. He guided their vehicle into what appeared to be a solid rock face, revealing a concealed tunnel entrance that closed behind them. The passage led deep under the planet's surface, connecting to a network of abandoned mining shafts. Thresh's original settlers built these tunnels off the official grid, Eldon explained, as they continued on foot, the ceiling too low for the vehicle in places. "The Alliance doesn't have them on any maps." The journey through the narrow passages was arduous, especially for Nyara, whose injuries had not fully healed. By the time they emerged into the hidden outpost, her breathing was labored and her steps unsteady. "Rest," Eldon urged, helping her to a makeshift bed in the corner of the facility. "I'll set up the transmitter." As he worked, Nyara's eyes traced his movements with newfound appreciation. There was an efficiency to his actions that spoke of both military training and personal adaptability. He had survived in this harsh environment by being resourceful, by finding value in discarded things, including perhaps himself. "Why did you stay on Thresh after your discharge?" she asked suddenly, Someone with your skills could have found work on dozens of worlds. Eldon's hands paused briefly. Tried that. Couldn't outrun my reputation, the military made sure of it. He continued assembling components. Here at least nobody cares who you were before. Only what you can contribute now. And what do you contribute, Eldon Vale? He glanced at her, those amber eyes catching the dim light. I fix things. People, mostly. A wry smile. Some beyond repair, but I try anyway. The transmitter hummed to life, its ancient display flickering with diagnostics. Eldon stepped back, gesturing for Nyara to take over. It's ready. This is your show now. Nyara moved to the console, fingers hovering over unfamiliar controls. This crude technology was centuries removed from the quantum interfaces of Meridian Prime. Yet its purpose was the same, to bridge vast distances, to connect separated worlds. My message must reach Syndictalia on the sanctuary moon of Illyria, she said. She leads a coalition that supported my resource redistribution initiatives. If anyone can challenge Veritax's claim to my position, it's her. As Nyara composed her transmission, a complex series of authenticated codes and compressed data that would prove her identity and outline Veritax's treachery, Eldon kept watch at the outpost perimeter. Sensors, movement on the surface, he reported tensely. Multiple vehicles, military grade. The storm's covering us, but they're using a search pattern. Nyara worked faster, uploading critical evidence she had gathered before the assassination attempt. Proof of Veritax's collusion with resource barons from the elite worlds. When the transmission was ready, she hesitated, her finger poised above the activation key. Once I send this, she said quietly, there's no turning back. The signal will lead them here, storm or no storm. Eldon moved to her side, his hand covering hers. Then we'd better be gone before they arrive. Their eyes met, and in that moment, unspoken truths hung between them. If Nyara reclaimed her position, she would return to a life among the stars, to responsibilities that spanned systems. A life where a former Alliance medic had no place. Nyara pressed the key, sending her message across the void. The transmission took less than a minute to complete, but in that time the perimeter alerts intensified. They've triangulated the signal, Eldon said, grabbing their emergency packs. We need to move, now. They barely made it back to the tunnel entrance when the first explosions rocked the outpost behind them. Special Forces troops wearing atmosphere suits that protected them from the dust storm began rappelling from dropships. This way, Eldon pulled Nyara into a narrow side passage that seemed barely large enough to accommodate them. They moved in near darkness, guided only by the dim light of Eldon's portable lamp. Where does this lead? Nyara gasped, struggling to keep pace. If we're lucky, to an exit near the eastern ridge. If not... He didn't finish the thought. The passage narrowed further, forcing them to crawl through sections where cave-ins had partially blocked the way. Behind them, they could hear the muffled sounds of pursuit, the methodical advance of trained soldiers who wouldn't be deterred by darkness or tight spaces. They emerged from the tunnels into the heart of the dust storm, visibility reduced to mere inches. Eldon produced 2 breathing masks from his pack, designed to filter the abrasive particles. The storm's intensity is increasing, he shouted over the howling wind. If we can reach the vehicle I cached in the eastern ravine, we might outrun them. Hand in hand, they pushed forward through the blinding tempest. Nyara's legs trembled with exhaustion, her recent injuries protesting each step, but she refused to slow their pace. In her mind, she recited the navigation coordinates of Thresh's surface, features, knowledge she had once studied as an academic, exercise now becoming crucial to survival. They were halfway across the exposed ridge when the ground beside them erupted in a spray of superheated rock. Through the swirling dust, the unmistakable shape of an Alliance gunship materialized, its targeting systems compensating for the storm. Down. Eldon tackled Nyara as another blast scorched the air above them. They tumbled down the ridge's steep incline, a controlled fall that carried them away from the immediate danger, but separated them from their planned escape route. When they finally came to rest in a shallow depression, Eldon was clutching his side, blood seeping between his fingers. It's nothing, he insisted, seeing Nyara's horrified expression. Caught some shrapnel. The vehicle is still reachable if we circle around through the lower gullies. But as he tried to stand, his legs buckled beneath him. The wound was worse than he admitted. Nyara made her decision in an instant. You won't make it at this pace, and I won't leave you. She activated the emergency beacon from his pack, the one thing they had agreed not to use except in the direst circumstances. Your friends in the settlement will come for you. Eldon's eyes widened with understanding. No, Niara, no. She silenced him with a kiss, fierce and desperate. I have to draw them away from you. Before he could protest further, she took his sidearm and backup transmitter. If I keep moving, they'll follow the stronger signal. By the time they realize their mistake, you'll be safely hidden. They'll kill you, Eldon said, his voice breaking. Or worse. Niara's smile was sad but determined. They already tried once and failed. She touched his face one last time. Find me again, Eldon Vale, when the stars align. Then she was gone, a shadow disappearing into the storm, leaving Eldon calling her name into the howling wind. Beyond the horizon. 3 months after Niara's disappearance, Eldon sat in Lorik's communication center in Karst Basin, obsessively monitoring transmissions from the core worlds. The wound in his side had healed, leaving another scar to join his collection, but the ache in his chest remained constant. You need to stop this, Lorik said, not unkindly. You're driving yourself into the ground. Eldon ignored him, adjusting the receiver to capture a faint signal originating from Meridian Prime's governmental broadcast. Reports had been conflicted and chaotic for weeks. Rumors of political upheaval, of faction fighting within the celestial architecture, of Archon Veritax facing accusations of treason. There's still no confirmation she's alive, Lorik continued. The Alliance took her 3 months ago. If she'd survived... She survived, Eldon interrupted, his voice leaving no room for doubt. She's too valuable to kill. They would have taken her back to Meridian Prime for questioning, for leverage against her allies. The transmission suddenly clarified, and both men fell silent as the news filtered through. Unprecedented developments in the celestial architecture today, as Syndictalia of Illyria presented evidence, vindicating the supposedly deceased celestial, architect Niara Zeph. Sources confirm that Archon Veritax has been removed from power pending investigation. The hegemony faction's influence appears to be waning as several key supporters have denounced Veritax's actions. Eldon leaned forward, heart pounding. She did it. Her message got through. But the broadcast continued without mentioning Niara's current status or whereabouts. The uncertainty was maddening. Days later, as Eldon repaired a filtration unit outside his dwelling, keeping his hands busy while his mind remained elsewhere, a sleek ship unlike any he'd seen before descended from Thresh's amber sky. It bore no military markings, no faction insignia, just the clean lines of extraordinary technology. He stood watching its approach, neither running nor reaching for a weapon. Something told him this moment had been inevitable since he'd carried a wounded stranger from a dust storm months ago. The ship landed with barely a whisper. Its ramp extended, and a figure emerged. Not Niara, but a tall, dignified woman whose bearing suggested authority. Eldon Vale? She called, approaching with measured steps. Depends who's asking, he replied cautiously. I am Syndictalia of Illyria. She studied him with intelligent eyes. Niara Zeph told me where to find you. A surge of emotion nearly overwhelmed him. She's alive then, Talia nodded. And reinstated as celestial architect, though the political situation remains complicated. Why are you here? Eldon asked, though part of him already knew. To offer you passage, Talia said simply. Niara cannot leave her position at this critical juncture, but she asked me to bring you to her if you're willing. The invitation hung in the air between them. Eldon looked back at his modest dwelling, at the life he had built in exile. It wasn't much, but it had been enough until Niara. When do we leave, he asked. The journey to Meridian Prime took 7 days, even in Talia's advanced vessel. During that time, Eldon learned more about the complex politics Niara navigated daily, about the revolution his existence had inadvertently sparked. Your relationship with her has become something of a symbol, Talia explained. A celestial architect finding connection with someone from the outer worlds, it challenges centuries of hierarchical thinking. We weren't trying to make a statement, Eldon said. Talia's smile was knowing. The most powerful statements are often those not deliberately made. Meridian Prime appeared, through the viewports as a world of breathtaking beauty, crystal spires and quantum architecture floating above a pristine landscape. Eldon had seen images in propaganda broadcasts, but the reality was both more magnificent and more intimidating than he'd imagined. They docked at a private platform high above the public levels. Security was extensive but discreet. Eldon followed Talia through corridors of shifting light, feeling increasingly out of place in his practical thresh clothing. Finally, they entered a vast chamber whose walls seemed to contain glimpses of distant star systems. At its center stood a crystalline platform where a solitary figure worked, manipulating cosmic models with graceful movements. Nyara. She looked different here. Regal, powerful, her purple skin luminescent under the specialized lighting. She wore the formal attire of her position, intricate and symbolic. Yet when she turned and saw him, the expression that transformed her face was entirely familiar. For a moment neither moved. Then, protocol forgotten, Nyara rushed toward him. Eldon caught her in his arms, lifting her slightly in his embrace as their lips met in a kiss that bridged worlds. "You found me," she whispered when they finally parted. "You left a pretty clear trail," he replied, smiling through the emotion tightening his throat. Later, in her private chambers, luxurious but simpler than he'd expected, Nyara explained the changes sweeping through the 9 systems. Veritax was imprisoned awaiting trial. The hegemony faction was in disarray. Her resource redistribution plan was being implemented, though not without resistance. "There's still so much to do," she said, curled against him on a lounger overlooking the glittering cityscape. "Centuries of inequality can't be undone in months. And where do I fit into all this?" Eldon asked, voicing the question that had followed him across the stars. Nyara sat up, facing him with sudden intensity. "That depends on what you want, Eldon Vale." "I want you," he said simply. "The rest is negotiable." She smiled, taking his hands in hers. "Then I have a proposition. Thresh and worlds like it have suffered most under the old system. They need an advocate here, someone who understands their realities." Her eyes held his. Someone with direct access to the celestial architect. Understanding dawned. "You're offering me a position?" "I'm offering you a purpose," she corrected. "And a place by my side if you want it." Eldon considered the magnitude of what she proposed, leaving behind the simplicity of Thresh for the complexity of Meridian Prime's political sphere, becoming a voice for worlds the elite had long ignored. "I'm not a politician," he warned. "Good," Nyara replied. "We have too many of those already. What we need are healers, people who fix what's broken." Her fingers traced the scar on his temple. "That's what you do, isn't it?" As dawn broke over Meridian Prime, casting rainbow refractions through the crystal spires, Eldon and Nyara stood on her private balcony, watching the new day illuminate a changing world. His arm encircled her waist, her head rested against his shoulder. 2 beings from vastly different origins now writing a shared story. "There will be opposition," Nyara said softly. "To my policies, to us. Some traditions run too deep to change overnight." Eldon smiled, remembering the storm they had already weathered together. "Let them oppose. We've faced worse odds." She turned in his arms, her expression both vulnerable and determined, the same duality he'd first witnessed months ago on a dust-swept planet at the edge of everything. "In all my calculations," she murmured, "in all the cosmic alignments I've studied and created, I never predicted you. Eldon Vale. Some things exist beyond calculation," he replied, drawing her closer, "beyond the stars themselves." Their kiss was witnessed only by the rising sun, a promise between 2 souls who had found each other against impossible odds, and who would now face whatever came next as they had survived everything before, together.